So fellas, with the recent talks of Ilia Topuria moving to 155 to potentially take on Islam Makhachev or even maybe Arman Tsarukyan or Charles Oliveira, I thought I'd matchmake Ilia Topuria in a theoretical matchup against every single ranked fighter in the top 15 of the division to kind of see how he would fare against every individual fighter from 15 to the champion to Makhachev. And we'll go in there with the first fighter in the top 15, which is Ignacio Bahamondes, just recently ranked after beating Jalin Turner. How would Topuria do against Bahamondes? Now, before I pick a winner, let's talk about the strengths and weaknesses that Bahamondes would have over Topuria. The first of all, the strengths is he's a long-rangey striker. Topuria is quite short, even for the featherweight division. Going up to 155, you can only imagine Bahamondes was always going to have a range advantage. He's got decent grappling as well. Trains with the likes of Bilal Muhammad, just submitted Jalin Turner. He's got decent grappling, and he is quite big for the lightweight division as well, which again, Topuria moving up a division to lightweight, you want the best size advantage you can have, and I feel like those are the main strengths that Bahamondes has. The weaknesses, he's massively untested. The best fighter you faced is Jalin Turner, and he's now retired. That's your best win. He also beat Manuel Torres, so he's definitely worthy of that top 15 spot, but he's untested. He hasn't got the crispest hands. We saw in that fight with Ludovic Klein, the boxing up close of Ignacio Bahamondes was quite a weakness. He didn't really use all his range to his advantage, and he was getting kind of caught by Ludovic Klein with the hands. And the blueprint's there to beating him. He's lost 5 times in his professional career. He's lost a couple of times in the UFC. So I'm pretty sure a guy like Topuria, who seems to be the master of game plans, would find a way to beat Bahamondes. Now, who am I picking to win? I'm going Ilia Topuria to win this one by first round TKO. Bahamondes likes to fight up close, as shown in that fight with Ludovic Klein. He doesn't really utilize his long-rangey style, which I just highlighted as a strength, to his advantage, which is why I think Ilia Topuria would have a good job getting him against the cage, backing him up, engaging in a boxing fight, and managing to land on the chin of Ignacio Bahamondes and knocking him out. When it comes to grappling, I don't think there'll be any grappling exchanges in this fight. There's no way that Bahamondes is taking Topuria down. Topuria is a much better grappler, but I think it would be a stand-up fight where Topuria closes the distance, knocks out Ignacio Bahamondes. Then we've got at number 14, a completely different fighter, Grant Dawson. The strengths of Grant Dawson, heavy wrestler with a ton of success. Now, Grant Dawson has taken down, I think, every single fighter in his UFC career, apart from Bobby Green. And he's like 12-1 in the UFC, some crazy record. Very dominant with the wrestling too. He's managed to, like I just said, take everybody down. And he's got a solid stamina and pace that he's able to keep up for 3 rounds. So, just a high-pace, high-pressure wrestler. Very good at controlling people. The weaknesses, he is quite chinny. Got knocked out by Bobby Green, and it wasn't even like a proper shot. He just got knocked out. I forgot which. It might have been a right hand, but got slept by Bobby Green, and he's been wobbled in a few fights as well. Even in his last fight against Diego Ferreira, you can see that Grant Dawson doesn't really take well to getting hit on the chin. Awful stand-up. His stand-up's terrible. He's never had a significant moment on the feet, and he does lack a bit of finishing ability. I know earlier on in his UFC career, he was pulling off a couple of submissions, but those were against low-level fighters. Now that the competition is increased, he's not really getting those finishes as often, so he's kind of just a control-time wrestler with awful stand-up. Who am I picking to win? Topuria wins this one by first-round KO. If you're getting knocked out by Bobby Green, I don't see how Ilia Topuria wouldn't knock you out. I think Topuria keeps this fight standing, just like he's able to do against other grapplers like Bryce Mitchell and some other grapplers that he's faced in his UFC career. Keeps the fight standing. And then I just think he knocks Grant Dawson out. Grant Dawson does look very kind of, like I can see Grant Dawson getting knocked out again. If you look at his fight against Diego Ferreira, the stand-up was all over the place. He was getting tagged. He was avoiding the striking at all costs, shooting panic takedowns. That ain't going to work against Ilia Topuria. I think he lands the shot on Grant Dawson, knocks him out in the very first round. I don't see there being much wrestling offense. I mean, I see a lot of wrestling offense from Grant Dawson. I just don't see much success from it. I'm going Ilia Topuria to win this one by first round KO. Then we've got number 13, Benoit Saint-Denis. Probably shouldn't be ranked in the top 15, to be fair. The strengths of Benoit Saint-Denis is he's dangerous everywhere the fight goes. He can knock you out on the feet. He can submit you. He's very dangerous, very well-rounded guy. He's Benoit Saint-Denis. There isn't necessarily an easy place to go in the fight. And he's a tough guy, man. Took a beating from Renato Moicano. It was only stopped from the doctors. And he's taken some beatings in his UFC career before. The one against Zaleski de Santos, where he got his ass whooped and was able to keep walking forward, was respectable. So, very tough guys, Benoit Saint-Denis, and well-rounded. The weaknesses, he's got an awful gas tank. Maybe it was the staph infection, but after the first round against Dustin Poirier, he was completely gassed. His defense sucks, and he is chinnable. Dustin Poirier was able to chin him, and he's just overall defense, whether it be grappling or striking, it does suck, and I can see him getting chinned. And for that reason, I'm picking Ilia Topuria to win this one by first round KO. I think we'd see a bit of grappling from Benoit Saint-Denis in the first round, just like we did against Dustin Poirier, but I think inevitably we're going to see Ilia Topuria land on the chin of Benoit Saint-Denis. In a 5-rounder, even if he gets in the later rounds, I reckon Topuria, I can almost guarantee that Benoit Saint-Denis is going to gas out, and it's just going to be Topuria teeing off on him. But I think in the second round is where we're going to see Topuria clip Benoit Saint-Denis. Like I said before, hasn't got the best defense. He's been chinned by Dustin Poirier. His gas tank isn't the best, and even though he's got grappling, it's not that good to the point where I'd say he's better than Topuria. So Topuria keeps the fight standing. Probably has to face some grappling adversity early on, but eventually we'll get the knockout in the first couple of rounds. Then we've got number 12, an interesting matchup. Paddy Pimblett, hand sanitizer boy, as Paddy Pimblett calls him. Obviously, there's a bit of a rivalry. It's kind of died down since they started shaking hands, or at least they fist bumped each other at the UFC London weigh-ins. But either way, quite a big rivalry at one point, especially back in 2022. The strength of Paddy Pimblett is the mental games. He's the only real guy who, I mean, he's like the only real guy who has a massive problem with Ilia Topuria. Like I said, he has kind of died down, but there was at one point a huge rivalry between the two of them. Maybe Paddy Pimblett could pull off some mental games, but if we're talking actually in Octagon, he's got the elite grappling and submissions. Paddy Pimblett has got really good jiu-jitsu. His jiu-jitsu's elite. He showed it against, what's his name, Bobby Green. His grappling's amazing, very good judo as well, and he's big and strong for 155, like we highlighted with Bahamondes. The best type of fighter you want against Ilia Topuria at 155 is a guy who's big for the division, because Topuria's moving up as a small featherweight. So Paddy Pimblett having that size and strength advantage is going to be key to beating Topuria. But the weaknesses, he's a very basic striker. He's got a body kick. He's got a good body kick, good lead kick, but he is a very basic striker. Questionable defense. He has improved, don't get me wrong, but go back to the Jared Gordon fight, he's getting clipped on the feet, and he's a bit of a clinch merchant, is Paddy Pimblett. He's not like a double leg takedown type of grappler. He wants to get you in the clinch, and a guy like Topuria who's so good at controlling the range and getting in and getting out, I think we'll be able to avoid that. And I'm going to pick Ilia Topuria to win this one by second round KO. I actually do think Paddy Pimblett makes it into the second round, because I don't think Paddy Pimblett's going to explode in a firefight. I think Paddy Pimblett's going to stay very defensively cautious, as he did against Bobby Green. But eventually, we've talking about Ilia Topuria. He's going to back Paddy Pimblett against the cage, and he's going to knock him out. If you can do it to Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway, some of the most elite strikers in UFC history, I don't see why he wouldn't be able to do it against Paddy Pimblett. Topuria by knockout in the second round. But I do think people are underrating Paddy Pimblett's advantages. Like, he is big for the division. He has got really good grappling. He's not going to be dumb and stand with Topuria. So I think Paddy Pimblett could make it a bit of a, not a dirty fight, but a bit of a tough grappling fight. But I'm just waffling. Topuria's knocking out in the second round. Then we've got number 11, which is going to be Rafael Fiziev. This would actually be such a good fight. And I think Fiziev's now moved down to 145, which is a shame, because if we ever saw this fight, it'd be fireworks. The strength of Rafael Fiziev, world-class Muay Thai. One of the best Muay Thai strikers in the UFC right now. Great kicker, great use of his striking, as he showed that in nearly every single fight in the UFC. And he's got an improved ground game. Coming into the first Gaethje fight, the big talks was Gaethje going to take it down with Rafael Fiziev? Well, he just took down Justin Gaethje and had him in, he was controlling Justin Gaethje on the ground, which is something I never thought I'd say about Rafael Fiziev. So he has improved his ground game, and he's got world-class Muay Thai and could pose a striking threat to Topuria. The weaknesses, he has got questionable stamina. In both Gaethje fights, he's gassed out in the third round. So if you go in 5 rounds with Topuria, maybe we'd see a very, maybe the stamina is something that'd be questionable for Fiziev. He does lack KO power. I know he's had a couple of KOs in the UFC against the likes of Rafael dos Anjos and Renato Moicano, but he isn't known for his KO ability. He's known for mainly breaking people down with his Muay Thai, and he does leave himself open a lot. In that second fight with Justin Gaethje, Gaethje was cracking him multiple times in the fight, obviously, dropped him with that massive uppercut. And I'm going to go with Ilia Topuria to win this one, but I'm actually going to go 5th round TKO for Ilia Topuria. I think Fiziev can make it far in this fight. I really can. I think it would be Topuria's grappling that ends up getting a finish. I see this going very similar to the Josh Emmett fight, where Topuria is kind of just doing enough in the striking, has a couple of problems with the Muay Thai and the kicking range of Rafael Fiziev, but eventually will just eventually mix up the grappling, take Rafael Fiziev down and beat him with the ground and pound. But like I said, I don't think this would be a pure knockout for Topuria. I think it would be one of those fights like a Josh Emmett, where he breaks Rafael Fiziev down round after round with the boxing, with the grappling, until eventually Rafael Fiziev's got nothing left in the tank. He's toast. Topuria takes him down, beats him via ground and pound. I'm going 5th round TKO for Ilia Topuria, but this would, like I said before, be such a firefight. Anyway, number 10 in the lightweight division is going to be Renato Moicano versus Ilia Topuria. Just challenged Makhachev for the belt versus potentially the next guy to challenge Makhachev for the belt. The strengths of Moicano, amazing grappler. His wrestling's improved. His jiu-jitsu is next level. He's one of the best grapplers right now in the 155-pound division. Well, maybe not one of the best. He's not up there with the likes of Oliveira and Sarukian and obviously Makhachev, but he's still an amazing grappler. Good use of range as well as Renato Moicano. He started using his kicking range a lot. I liked how he looked on the feet against Islam Makhachev for like the minute and a half that they were standing for. And he's tough as nails. He's taken a beating by so many guys. He's fought so many top guys before and he's come back. That fight with Jalin Turner where he nearly got got knocked out and came back and finished him. Very tough guys, Moicano, but the weaknesses, very bullyable on the feet. Yeah, Moicano, I feel like every time you put Moicano against an elite striker with amazing takedown defense that isn't as dumb as Jalin Turner, he's going to get bullied on the feet. We saw it in the Rafael Fiziev fight. We saw it in the Rafael Dos Anjos fight. And I just think an elite striker like Topuria would bully him. He's not an elite pure wrestler. His wrestling has improved, but he's more of a BJJ guy. It's not like every single time Moicano shoots a takedown, you're in trouble. You just don't want to be in clinching range. And he's got a very limited skill set. With the grappling, with the striking, quite a limited fighter. I'm going to go with Ilia Topuria by first round KO. I can see Topuria just chinning Moicano. Moicano's very kind of susceptible to getting caught on the feet. Like I said, nearly got knocked out by, what's his name, Jalin Turner. Got bullied by Rafael Dos Anjos. Fiziev was able to knock him out. I think Topuria would back him up against the cage and land that shot on the feet. I don't think there'd be much grappling. Topuria's going to back him up, knock him out in classic Topuria style. And unfortunately for Moicano, he would get put to sleep by Ilia Topuria in the first round. Then we've got number 9 in the lightweight division, which is going to be Beneil Dariush. Strength of Beneil Dariush is that he's good everywhere the fight goes. You know, he can grapple, he can strike, he can wrestle, he can kick, he can do everything. Can Beneil Dariush. He's got that veteran experience. He's been in the UFC for a long time, and he's quite crafty as well. That's what I liked about Beneil Dariush, especially in the fight with Gamrot. He has got quite a crafty style, but the weaknesses is he's very chinny and knockoutable. You know, we got knocked out by Arman Tsarukyan. He's been knocked out by Oliveira. I really worry about the chin of Beneil Dariush against somebody like Topuria. He's been inactive for a year and a half. His last fight was, I think, December of 2023, and that was coming off 2 losses, and he just isn't better than Ilia anywhere the fight goes. There's not a single area of the fight where I would favour Beneil Dariush to beat Topuria. So I'm going to go with Ilia Topuria to win this one by first round KO. Yeah, Dariush should be a victim in this fight. I think Topuria, being the guy that he is going to maybe calculate Beneil Dariush for the first minute, feel him out a little bit, and then just like he did against the other guys that he's knocked out, eventually find the range and getting close, knock out a Beneil Dariush in the very first round. I'm expecting Beneil Dariush at this moment in time to look a lot slower, look a lot worse than he did against Oliveira and Tsarukyan. And even though we did lose to the 2 best in the division, we talked about Topuria, who's probably better than Oliveira if we're talking about, you know, current status in the UFC. Probably a much bigger threat than Oliveira on the feet as well. So I just see Topuria getting the knockout against chinny Beneil Dariush. I think this is actually a very favourable matchup for Ilia Topuria. So Topuria by first round KO. Then we've got number 8, Mateusz Gamrot. The strength of Mateusz Gamrot is he's a phenomenal wrestler. One of the best wrestlers in this division right now. I'd say apart from Makhachev and Tsarukyan, Mateusz Gamrot's up there with one of the best wrestlers. He's very tough as well. Had that fight of the year against Dan Hooker. He can take a beating, can Mateusz Gamrot. Very good chin too. And he makes it tricky with everybody, no matter who he's fighting, whether it's Beneil Dariush, whether it's Dan Hooker, whether it's, you know, Rafael Dos Anjos. No matter who he's going against, he's going to make it tricky for everybody he faces. But the weaknesses of Gamrot is he does lack finishing ability. Isn't known for his submissions, isn't known for his knockouts. I can't see him finishing Topuria. He has got very average stand-up too. He's not a terrible striker. He's not Moicano, but he's got a very average stand-up base. And I'm sorry, but if Dan Hooker can beat him, then I'm pretty sure Ilia Topuria can beat him too. I'm going to go with Ilia Topuria to win this one, but I'm picking him to win this one by decision. I don't think he finishes Gamrot even in a 5-rounder. We talked about this before. Gamrot's very tough. He can take a beating. He's got an underrated chin. So I feel like it's going to be a fight where Topuria hits him with all his best shots. Gamrot comes back. He's able to survive, and I can see Gamrot giving Topuria some bad wrestling problems in this fight. Not bad wrestling problems, but giving him adversity with the wrestling, because again, who's the best grappler we've seen Topuria face? It's Bryce Mitchell at the end of the day, and Bryce Mitchell's nowhere near on Gamrot's wrestling level when it comes to wrestling, so I reckon this would be a good clash between a striking style of Topuria and a grappling style of Gamrot, but inevitably, Topuria wins the majority of the rounds, kind of beats him down just like Dan Hooker did, probably more dominant fashion too. I'm going Ilia Topuria to win this one by a pretty comfortable, unanimous decision. Then we've got number 7, Michael Chandler versus Ilia Topuria. I wonder what the betting odds would be for this to be finished inside the distance. The strength of Michael Chandler is he's got knockout power. Listen, we saw Topuria struggle with that head kick from Jai Herbert. All I'm saying is we might see a front kick to the face from Michael Chandler or an overhand right that lands on Topuria, and it could be the wrong shot at the wrong time for Topuria. He's got explosive wrestling too, doesn't really use it to his advantage, which is what I'm going to get into in a second, but he has got that explosive wrestling, and he's an athletic freak, super athletic, super strong, kind of just like a ball of muscle for the division, so he could be a very explosive, tough matchup for Topuria. The weaknesses is obviously his awful fight IQ. He's got some of the worst fight IQ in the UFC right now, and it's no surprise. So easy to land on as well. It's not hard to clip Michael Chandler. Has been clipped in nearly every single one of his fights. Very beatable too is Michael Chandler. 2-4 in the UFC. His best win to Tony Ferguson and Dan Hooker. Very beatable guys, Michael Chandler. I'm going to go with Ilia Topuria to win this one by first round KO. I actually think this is one of the best stylistic matchups for Ilia Topuria if you think about it. Chandler's probably not going to initiate the wrestling because of his terrible fight IQ. And even if he does, it isn't like Topuria's a bad grappler. Chandler's so goofy on the feet. He's going to bounce in, bounce out. He's going to engage in a firefight. And he hasn't got the chin to do that, especially against one of the most lethal strikers in the UFC in Ilia Topuria. He's knocking out Michael Chandler in the very first round. Clips him with the right hand coming in. And Michael Chandler gets dropped, finished via ground and pound. I'm very confident that Ilia Topuria, even if it's not in the first couple of rounds, would put Michael Chandler to sleep. Chandler's a tough fight for a lot of people, like Paddy Pimblett, but Ilia Topuria is not one of those guys. He's knocking Michael Chandler out in the first round. Then we've got number 6 in the division. Daniel Hooker. Dan Hooker versus Ilia Topuria. The strength of Dan Hooker is that he's a great kickboxer. I mean, he's fought some of the best fighters in the world in the lightweight division for the past couple of years. A great kickboxer, very tough as well. I mean, his toughness is on display nearly every single one of his fights. In the fight with Gamrot, in the fight with Dustin Poirier, in the fight with Jalin Turner. He's almost every single fight that Dan Hooker's in, he's in a firefight and he's so tough. And he's a solid anti-grappler too. He showed that in the fight with Gamrot. He has got pretty good anti-grappling, trains at City Kickboxing, which is known for takedown defense. The weaknesses of Dan Hooker is that he gets beat up in every fight. It seems like every single fight Dan Hooker's getting beaten up. He got beaten up against Gamrot. He got battered against Dustin Poirier. Jalin Turner was beating him up too. Arnold Allen steamrolled him. Every fight that Dan Hooker wins, even in the fight with Edson Barboza back in like ages ago, he gets beat up in every single one of his fights, and that's why I don't favour him against Topuria. He's got a gambler's chin too. He hasn't got a bad chin. As I just said, he can go the distance, but sometimes it takes one bad shot to knock Dan Hooker out or wobble him, and he's just not really elite anywhere the fight goes. He's a great kickboxer, but he's not necessarily one of the upper echelon strikers in this division. Those are the weaknesses of Dan Hooker. Who am I picking to win? I'm picking Topuria to win this one by 4th round TKO. I think this would just be, like I said before, very similar to Ilia Topuria versus Josh Emmett, where it's just going to be Ilia Topuria teeing off on Dan Hooker the entire fight, dropping him every now and then, maybe not putting him to sleep out cold, but then again, he got knocked out by Chandler, so maybe he would. But either way, I think Topuria would just piece up Dan Hooker for the majority of the fight until eventually Dan Hooker's got nothing left. His face is falling off. Topuria lands one wrong shot at the wrong time on the chin of Dan Hooker and puts him out cold. So I'm going to go with a late stoppage by TKO for Ilia Topuria in this fight. I definitely see him beating Dan Hooker. I see him battering him on the feet, and I think a late finish, because of the toughness of Dan Hooker, I think he'll get past the first few, but a late finish is inevitable for Ilia Topuria. Then we've got number 5. Dustin Poirier. This would be a fight between two of the best boxers in the UFC. From a boxing perspective, one of the best fights you can make. The strengths of Dustin Poirier is, like I said, fantastic boxer. We've seen Topuria against really good boxers before. Volkanovski, Holloway, and here's another one at a weight class above in Dustin Poirier. Definitely one of the best boxers in the UFC, and just one of the highest level fighters in the UFC. Topuria's been at the top of the lightweight division, which is the most competitive in the UFC for the longest time, and he's fought literally only the best. Every single time Dustin Poirier is going out there, he's fighting the best they have to offer in the lightweight division, and he's been shown that he's an elite fighter for the longest time. The weaknesses of Dustin Poirier: looked very slow against Islam Makhachev. Listen, I'm not trying to discredit his performance against Islam Makhachev at all, but you can kind of tell that Dustin Poirier is starting to slow down a little bit on the feet. He has to worry about the takedowns as well of Ilia Topuria. Dustin Poirier does his best work when he doesn't have to worry about the takedowns, and I feel like Topuria, with that grappling background, he would definitely put that takedown threat in Dustin Poirier's mind, which is obviously going to make him a little bit more cautious on the feet, and he's just not as dangerous as Ilia Topuria. Even though he's probably got maybe like equal boxing of Topuria, I wouldn't say he's as dangerous where he's got devastating KO power just like Topuria does. Who am I picking to win? I'm going to go Ilia Topuria to win this one by decision. I think this would be such a competitive boxing stand-up fight, but I just see Topuria getting this one done. He's a much more fresh fighter. He's in his prime. He's younger, and I just see him being the better boxer than Dustin Poirier at this time. We've seen Ilia Topuria against elite boxers before, in Max Holloway, in Alexander Volkanovski. Then he'll not getting put to sleep. And even though I don't think he puts Dustin Poirier to sleep, Dustin Poirier is tough as nails. He has an underrated chin, and he's an absolute dog. I just see Ilia Topuria beating him, mixing up with the grappling as well to make it even worse for Dustin Poirier. I'm going Ilia Topuria to win this one by a fairly competitive but a unanimous decision in Ilia Topuria's favour. Then we've got number 4, which is going to be Max Holloway. Obviously, we've just seen him knock out Max Holloway in his last fight, but if we're talking about Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway at 155, the strengths that Holloway would have is the fact that he was making it competitive in their fight. Their first fight was competitive. It wasn't like Topuria was beating the crap out of him like it was with Josh Emmett. Holloway was what's making it competitive. There's an argument that he won the first round, and he looked amazing last time at 155. Obviously, had that amazing performance against Justin Gaethje, put him to sleep to put the cherry on top, and he's less drained. Listen, I'm not going to make excuses for Max Holloway, but there is an argument to say that his chin, obviously, cutting down to 145 at this stage in his career could have been, impacted by the weight cut, so he's going to be less drained at 155. The weaknesses of Max Holloway, though, he's been knocked out by Ilia Topuria, and let's be honest, he would get knocked out again. I'm going to go Ilia by KO in the second round. I mean, it goes without saying. The image is on screen right now. Even though it was arguably CGI, Ilia Topuria has knocked out Max Holloway before. I have no reason to pick Holloway again. Goes without saying, Ilia Topuria by KO in the second round. Number 3. Now we're in the top 3 of the division. We've got Ilia Topuria versus Justin Gaethje. The strengths of Justin Gaethje is an easy fight for nobody apart from Khabib. But apart from Khabib, he's an easy fight for no one. He's going to make you go through hell until you either get a finish or you get a decision, or you go to a decision. He's no one's easy fight. He's always looking to deal damage. He's a solid striker too. Again, he's a weird striker as Justin Gaethje. From a technique perspective, you don't want to rate Justin Gaethje that highly, but he gets it done against elite strikers consistently, and he does hit hard. From many fighters, they've said that Justin Gaethje is one of the hardest hitters at 155. Maybe that's going to be a problem with Topuria moving up, but we'll have to see. The weaknesses is that he's very chinnable. Justin Gaethje's been hit on the chin, knocked out, wobbled so many times in his UFC career. He's very chinnable, and his anti-grappling sucks as well. It seems like anytime you want to take Justin Gaethje down, you're going to have success. Even though he does from a bit of a grappling background before the UFC and before even MMA, his anti-grappling as a whole, it just completely sucks, which is where Topuria would have his favourite, an advantage. I'm going Topuria to win this one by KO in the first round. I just think Justin Gaethje is too vulnerable of a striker to get away with being in there with Ilia Topuria. This might work when you're facing the likes of Rafael Fiziev, maybe even Dustin Poirier, who don't necessarily hit like a truck, but Ilia Topuria, who's this knockout machine and has some of the best boxing, probably the best boxer in the UFC right now, you're not going to get away with that. I'm going Topuria to knock out Justin Gaethje in the first round. Gaethje leaves his chin up in the air in some sort of exchange. Topuria capitalizes on it and chins Justin Gaethje in the first round. Then we've got number 2 in the division, Charles Oliveira, a potential fight that could be happening next for Ilia Topuria. There's been rumors of this fight happening, and I would 100% want to see this fight. This is probably one of the best fights you can make in the organization right now. The strengths of Oliveira: extremely dangerous everywhere, hits very hard on the feet, nasty weight tie on the feet, his stand-up's elite, and obviously he's got the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the UFC. He's the most dangerous submission artist right now in the UFC, apart from maybe Makhachev. He's just so dangerous. You're never safe with Oliveira. Whether you're on the ground, whether you're in the stand-up, you're never going to be safe with Charles Oliveira. And now that he's starting to implement wrestling as well, which we just saw in that fight with Chandler, he's becoming even more dangerous by the day. But the weaknesses is he gets wobbled in every fight. Every single fight with Charles Oliveira, he's getting wobbled. He nearly got finished by Michael Chandler. He got dropped by Islam Makhachev. He got dropped multiple times by Gaethje and Dustin Poirier. The first fight with Chandler nearly got knocked out too. It seems like every single fight Charles Oliveira gets wobbled, and he's just not as good in the pocket. I can see Oliveira being really good at range, but then when it gets in boxing range, Ilia Topuria lands on Charles Oliveira and just drops him or knocks him out. I'm going to go with Ilia Topuria by KO in the third round. Now, I think Oliveira is a very bad matchup for Topuria stylistically. In fact, I think he's one of the most dangerous fights for Topuria in the division because of how dangerous he is everywhere the fight goes. But I feel like Charles Oliveira is just too reckless for Ilia Topuria. He puts himself in too many situations where his chin's kind of up in the air. He's a bit of a reckless striker or just a reckless fighter overall. And you don't want to be reckless when you're facing Ilia Topuria. If Ilia Topuria can't knock him out, which I guess is a massive if, then it's a very bad matchup for Topuria. But I just don't like the recklessness of Charles Oliveira. I'd like to see a much more calmer approach facing Ilia Topuria. And I see Topuria at some point in the fight getting a knockout shot and knocking him out. So I'm going to go with a second round KO for Ilia Topuria. Maybe it's him playing possum, but we do see Oliveira get dropped in nearly every fight. I'm going Ilia Topuria by KO in the third round. And then we've got number 2 in the division, number 1 in the division, Arman Tsarukyan, who is going to be fighting, or was going to be fighting for the belt next. And another fight that Topuria's kind of avoided in the 155-pound division. The strengths of Arman Tsarukyan is he's one of the best wrestlers in the UFC. Outside of Islam Makhachev and maybe a couple other guys, I'd say Tsarukyan's definitely a top 3 best wrestlers in the UFC. In fact, I'd say he's got equal wrestling to Islam Makhachev, and he showed that in the fight that he had with Makhachev years ago. He's one of the best wrestlers. He has really solid stand-up too. He's not an elite striker necessarily, but he showed in the fight with Oliveira and Dariush that he has got stand-up ability, and he fights at a super high pace. He's not going to go in there and scrap and brawl with Ilia Topuria like a Gaethje or an Oliveira might do, but he's got a very high pace where he's in and out with the right moments. Very tricky matchup. The weaknesses is he has looked vulnerable in grappling exchanges before. We know Topuria comes from a jiu-jitsu background. We saw Arman Tsarukyan nearly get submitted multiple times by Charles Oliveira, but again, that's Oliveira. Even in the fight with Mateusz Gamrot, we've seen Gamrot have success with the wrestling before, and his boxing just isn't quite as good as Ilia Topuria's. Yes, he's got decent striking, but when it comes to the stand-up between the two of them, you definitely want to favour Topuria. Who am I picking to win? I'm going to go with Arman Tsarukyan, the first guy to beat Ilia Topuria. I think Tsarukyan is a terrible matchup for Ilia Topuria, and this is why I don't think Topuria beats him. Tsarukyan is not a reckless fighter. He's not going to put himself in situations where he gets chinned like a Charles Oliveira or a Justin Gaethje is. In fact, I don't think he wants to stand with Topuria, and when he does, it's going to be him fighting in bursts. But I think it's going to be the wrestling of Tsarukyan, a big wrestling guy at 155 with some of the best wrestling in the UFC. Like Topuria's grappling is pretty much untested, or wrestling is pretty much untested at the highest level. I think Tsarukyan's a terrible matchup for Ilia Topuria. I think the wrestling of Arman Tsarukyan is going to win this fight. He's going to win, pose too big of a wrestling threat, take down Topuria, control him with the wrestling, mix it up with his kind of high-paced striking, and I think Topuria having to worry about the takedowns and not being in a fight with Arman Tsarukyan is going to be worst-case scenario. I think Tsarukyan beats Topuria with the wrestling, and I'm going to pick him to win this one by unanimous decision, which brings us on to Ilia Topuria versus Islam Makhachev, one of the biggest and most demanded fights in the UFC right now. Now, the strengths of Islam Makhachev, it goes without saying. He's literally the best fighter in the UFC right now, and he beats Ilia everywhere, apart from boxing. I'd say pure boxing is where you'd give Topuria an advantage, but jiu-jitsu, wrestling, kicking game, overall kickboxing, I'd favour Makhachev. He beats him everywhere, and he's just a massive grappling threat too. Being so big for the division as well for Islam Makhachev, massive grappling threat to Topuria. The weaknesses of Islam Makhachev, though, is he does look human. He's been chinned before by Adriana Martin, so we know he's capable of getting knocked out, and Alexander Volkanovski and Dustin Poirier made him look beatable, and those guys have a similar style to Topuria in like a boxing heavy style, and they made, like, even though they lost pretty comfortably, apart from the first Volk fight, they made him look beatable. The first Alexander Volkanovski fight could have gone either way. The Dustin Poirier fight, Makhachev won comfortably, but it was still a dogfight. So he does look beatable, and Topuria can grapple. It ain't a one-dimensional Ilia Topuria. He can grapple, he is well-rounded, but I would go with Islam Makhachev to win this one by decision. I think in the striking exchanges, I can't see him getting chinned by Ilia Topuria. I don't think he'd be boxing at range. I think he'd be avoiding danger in the stand-up, using his kicking game to beat Topuria, and I see just Islam Makhachev manhandling Topuria with the wrestling. I know Topuria's got grappling, I know he comes from a jiu-jitsu background, but we're talking about Islam Makhachev, a big, strong 155er with the best clinch and the best wrestling in the UFC right now. I'm going to have to go with Islam Makhachev to defeat Ilia Topuria by a unanimous decision, even though this is a terrible matchup for Makhachev. They're both bad matchups for each other, which is why it's such a demanded fight, but I'm picking Makhachev to win. But that is me matchmaking Ilia Topuria against every single ranked UFC lightweight. Let me know if you agree, disagree with the fights, if anybody else beats Ilia Topuria. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you for watching.